The Four Corners region is very famous as the only place in the United States where four states come together at the same point. And those four states are, of course, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. If you follow the Utah-Colorado border straight up from Four Corners to the top of Colorado, where it meets the Wyoming border, there will be a Three Corners area where Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado all come together. This corridor, kind of along here, was famous in the waning years of the Old West, right about the same time as Red Dead Redemption 2, actually, in the very latest 1890s and then the very earliest 1900s, as the homeland of the Wild Bunch, otherwise known as the gang of Butch Cassidy and his best friend, the Sundance Kid, and the remainder of their gang. In fact, they had what is near Moab, Utah today. They had their hideout at Robber's Roost. What is near Casey, Wyoming today is where they had their other hideout, Hole in the Wall, which was actually their primary hideout. And then really right smack dab on the middle of the Three Corners was the Bassett Ranch. And Herb Bassett and his family, including his daughters Ann Bassett and Josie Bassett, lived there. They were not outlaws, but they were friendly with them and traded with them a great deal. The outlaws were in and out of their ranch, which was kind of centered on Browns Park, and they bought horses from them, they bought beef from them, they got in fights on their behalf with other people. The two daughters, Ann Bassett and Josie Bassett, had a number of what would have been scandalous affairs in any kind of polite society with a number of members of the gang, including Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid himself. This is still an interesting area today, and I've spent a little bit of time in the area. Another scenic thing to see right there in that area is Dinosaur National Monument, which straddles the Utah and Colorado borders. It's on both sides of the border. It's just barely south of the Wyoming border. And the Green River runs right through there as well, which is kind of famous as a rafting destination. But there's not much going on out there. Hardly anybody lives there. The towns are just absolutely tiny. There's like a few dozen families that live in, Dutch John, Utah, a few dozen that live in Browns Park, Colorado, a few dozen that live in places like Manila, and some of the other towns. It's really difficult to, find much of anything going on out there. It is very, very deserted even now. And, that's not entirely true of the entire corridor, of course, from Four Corners to the Three Corners area. There's a number of towns further south, like Moab, Utah on the Utah side, and Fruita and Grand Junction on the Colorado side. And there's, interstates that run through there and cross it. But it's, it's still interesting that northern part is still, nobody lives there, and it's still famous as much as anything else for the bandits that live there. And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or the Wild Bunch, I guess, were considered to be the most successful train robbers in the history of the Old West. And it's interesting that, like I said, similar to the Dutch Vanderlyn gang, they kind of came along at the end of the era and were among the last of the era. By 1905 or so, I think all of them had either been killed or imprisoned. Although some of them, were later released from prison and went on to become respectable-ish businessmen for the next, couple of decades or so. The girls calmed down after their fiery, scandalous affairs with the outlaws and ended up marrying, at least for a time. And, the Old West kind of faded away, and that was one of the last gasps of the Old West, is exactly that area. Also, before that, there had been a previous scandal in the area. There is a mountain that is not within Dinosaur National Monument, but is kind of part of the same portion of those mountains, and it's on a protected land, BLM land. It's called Diamond Mountain, and although it says mountain, it's really kind of a massif with a number of little peaks and stuff, and it kind of is considered almost a mini mountain range rather than a single mountain. It's called Diamond Peak, and it also is kind of, I think part of it is on the Utah side of the border, and most of it's on the Colorado side of the border. But again, it's right there, and it's, you know, within you could almost throw a rock from it into Wyoming. So it's right there in that Three Corners area as well. And it was famous because it's the site of the diamond hoax of 1872, when two different cousins bought some cheap diamond scraps from some gem cutters in South Africa and salted the ground at Diamond Peak. And they went to San Francisco and convinced some bakers and investors, and they had a good story, and they played it well. They were a good con men. They convinced them that they had found a diamond mine, and they took some people out there, some people who were surveyors and whatnot for the investors, and they found these diamonds that had been seeded or salted by these guys, and so they were given a lot of money for what would have been the equivalent of $14 million in today's money. And then, of course, it turns out that it wasn't too difficult before it was all determined that it was a hoax, and they were sued. And I don't know. Curiously, they went on to continue to operate as businessmen in the Midwest for a time. But it's an interesting area. If you've never been there, I encourage it. I am an outdoorsy kind of person. I love being outdoors, and I love kind of the desert mountain. That part is a little more desertish. There's a lot you can do for recreation. Like I said, you can. There's a lot of ATVing on the BLM land. There's river raft trips down the Green River, and the famous Gates of Lodore is right there. Dinosaur National Monument is right there, and it's a big area with lots to see and do. Flaming Gorge is there, and it's been dammed, so now there's a reservoir that you can go boating or fishing or jet skiing on. And then if you keep heading west along the Utah-Wyoming border, but just south of it, the Uinta Mountain Range is one of the few mountain ranges that runs east-west rather than, more or less north-south in the United States. And there's a handful of others that do, but only a handful. And it's an interesting range. I've been hiking there several times, and I think it's a beautiful part of the country, and it's a part of the country that not very many people live in. Anyway, I bring all this up because today we're going to focus on some bandit outlaws, and I don't know that or bandit outfits. I don't know that I necessarily think these outfits just say bandit, but for whatever reason I called them that. In reality, I got the idea from watching somebody's YouTube video, and I saw a guy with the cross bandoliers over the Valdes jacket, and I thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. I'm going to make an outfit based on that same kind of concept. All three of these outfits then feature cross bandoliers over a Valdes jacket, although in the case of the cold weather I used the Morales jacket, which looks almost the same but is furry and much warmer. And the whole point of this is that these outfits cannot use a coat, because I don't want to cover up the vest and I kept saying jacket, didn't I? I meant vest. None of these outfits use a coat because I didn't want to cover up the vest. I wanted the vest to show. It's very easy to make hot weather outfits that don't use a coat, obviously. I struggled a little bit to get the average temperature one up to average. I didn't have a lot of trouble with the cold because swapping to the Morales vest, plus using a very warm hat, sweater, very warm gloves, very warm boots, etc. It wasn't too hard. With the average one, I had to use a light vest and I had to use a light hat, which meant I had to do pretty much everything else that I could to warm it up so I didn't end up in the hot weather territory. The first one I made is the hot weather outfit. It's the one that I think holds together the best. The cold weather outfit I think also looks really kind of interesting. The average temperature one I'm a little iffy on. It's a little strange, and I admit that it's kind of strange. I don't know. I had kind of I kind of had fun making it, but it's a weird outfit, and I don't know how much I really loved it, to be honest with you. Part of it was trying to find a way to use some elements that I have one or two of, but I think are kind of silly. I used the wool shirt. I actually had used the Farley shirt too. I have a reddish Farley shirt, and I thought maybe the wool shirt would be a little warmer. It looks like they're probably about the same. I could have done either one. I used the Stewart top hat, and I don't know. I set myself up some very odd, restrictions in terms of this is what the theme is and this is what kinds of elements I have to use. I might have done it a little bit differently and I might do another version of it, if you will, and maybe I'll use a different hat. I might even use a different vest. I actually have a Valdes Vest that is black but with big red paneling on it. And if I did that, I could do it over a black Donegal sweater and probably have a little bit easier time getting to average. And granted, the outfit will look a lot more black, and this version looks a lot more red. I'm always looking for ways to get a little bit of color because I feel like almost all of my clothes are either leather brown or black, and I just have a lot of those colors. Even though I feel like I have a lot of clothes, they color. I don't have a lot of color, really. Let's just say. So anyway, this one was a little bit of an experiment. I tried to do something that had some color. I tried to use something that used a little bit of an odd element. The hat in particular is just a weird hat, and I never really know what to do with it. So it's a strange looking outfit, but I kind of like it. And then in the meantime, like I said, I've got crossed bandoliers. I really wish I had a few more crossed bandoliers. I only have 3 of them, and 2 of them, although they're different bandoliers, they end up kind of looking almost identical. They're about the same color. So I actually need to probably invest a little bit more in getting a few more of those. But that was really kind of the impetus behind this, is that I wanted cross bandoliers and I wanted the Valdes Vest, which has a little bit of a thing around the shoulder. It looks like the sleeves are kind of torn off, but a little bit's left, and it kind of just helps a little bit with the round-shouldered problem of the characters in Red Dead Online. Keen-eyed observers may also have noticed that I spent $400 out of not out of real money, out of my Red Dead money, to update my appearance a little bit. It's not a major thing. My eyebrows are a little different. My nose is a little thinner. A few other minor things changed. I added a little scar just to give them a little bit more character. I don't know. In a few more weeks, I may have decided that some of those changes were not for the best. I don't know yet. We'll see. Or I may not really care. But keen-eyed observers may notice that my character looks just a little bit different, and probably will in many of the videos that go forward now, although I do have some recorded video on my phone that I will use, so we'll go back to some of using my older appearance at some point. Anyway, those are my outfits. Like I said, they're kind of bandit themed, but not really. By bandit, what I really mean is that's just what I called them. They really are cross bandoliers over a vest with no coat.